How's it going, everyone? So what have I got now? I've got a 2010 Silverado. This thing's pretty hammered. It's a work truck. It's been abused. But anyway, it's got a 4.3 liter V6. It's rear-wheel drive, and I got to change the driver's side motor mount. I've never done one on one of these with the V6. I'm assuming it can't be any more difficult than when these things have a 4.8 or a 5.3. I don't know if any of you have ever done one of those. They're time-consuming. They're a bit of a pain to get to. So, but yeah, anyway, with the V6, with the 4.3, I know a lot of people cry and complain how underpowered they are, and they are underpowered, especially with the automatic. They're kind of sluggish. That's the old school 4.3 that's based off the 5.7 small block Chevy. I know later on, I don't know what years, like 2014 or something along those lines, the 4.3 was based off of like the 5.3, that design. So I've never actually driven one. I've never actually seen one. I'd be curious to see how they respond. But like my own personal truck is an 06 and it's a 4.3, but it's a stick shift and it's a four-wheel drive. I love the truck. Yes, it's underpowered, but I tell you what, with the stick shift, they're smooth. They are a smooth driving truck. Actually, they're a pleasure to drive. I actually have 3 customers that have 4.3 V6s with 5 speeds, but they're all rear-wheel drive. Mine's a four-wheel drive, and I tell you what, the stick shift, what a difference that makes. It's a nice vehicle. I would buy another one in a heartbeat. You're just not going to win any drag races, and you're not towing anything big with it. That's all. But I've loaded I put a yard of gravel in the back. I put a yard of mulch. I put a yard of topsoil in the back of my truck, and you know it handles it. I got no problem with it. I've towed a car with it. That's a little tricky because, you know, with the 4.3 and the stick shift, yeah, you know what I'm getting at. But anyway, so I digress. So here I am underneath the hood of this thing, and let me show you what I got. So right here, it's a 2010. Like I said, it's been beat up. It's a work truck, and a lot of different people drive it. So now this mount here, I don't have anybody to help show me, or, you know, sit inside it and brake stand it so you can actually see that it's broken. But the mount down here, if you brake stand it, that's the mount down there. It'll actually lift the side of the motor up. So in order to change these, you usually have to go, especially with the V8, you got to go in through the fender, which I know I'm going to have to do on this. But it requires taking the inner fender well out. So I'm going to put this up in the air, I'm going to inspect it from underneath, and I'm going to probably take the wheel off and take the inner fender out. All right, so let's get going with that. All right, it's actually up in the air. Since it's a two-wheel drive, this thing is pretty much out in the open. I'm sorry if you're hearing wind noise. I got the fans going because it's so darn humid. The floors are just sweating like mad. Anyway, these 3 bolts that come in from up top, those I can actually get from underneath the hood with a long extension and a swivel 15. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 on the motor. I think this is going to be pretty simple. So let me let this back down. Let me get these 3 bolts out, and then I'm going to put it back up, and I'm going to get those 4 bolts off the block, jack the motor up, and get the motor mount out. Yeah, this should be pretty easy, actually. I've been bitten in the past when I say that, so let's see what happens. You can get to the underhood bolts pretty easy. Use a shorter extension for the 2 in the rear, and then I use a longer extension in the front. Here, let me just show you. I got the 2 in the rear out. I mean, literally 10 seconds they came right out. But here, got a long extension with a swivel 15 down there, and basically blast, it's out. And then a lot of times if you have to, just grab a magnet to pick it up. And that's pretty much it. So let me put it up in the air. Let me get that bolt out. Let me put it up in the air, and then I'll get the 4 bolts out of the motor itself. And I'm going to probably jack it up and support the motor somehow, just so I can get the mount in and out, or out and in. Okay, so the 4 bolts, they came right out. I mean, it was so simple, it wasn't even funny. I don't show you a lot of this stuff because I figure I don't want to take up your time with just showing you this, but the 4 bolts came right out. I used my air ratchet, a little extension, and a 15. And, you know, I just got in there, you know, like this to get to them, and they came right out. So now there's nothing holding it in place other than the weight of the motor. So now I'm going to have to jack up on this thing somehow to get some distance there so I can get that thing swapped over. So let me see what I can come up with. All right, so I got a jack underneath here. I got a block of wood there on the pan. I have it jacked up pretty much as far as it'll go. The motor went up nice and smooth to a point, and then it kind of came to a stop, and I can feel it lifting up on the body of the truck, or on, you know, on the chassis of the truck. As you see, I have a pole jack in the back there. I have that on the trailer hitch because I don't want to unload the vehicle on the lift and possibly knock it off. So always be safe. Always use a pole jack at the other end. Do something. If you're doing it on jack stands, same thing. Just make sure that you are supporting something somewhere else, just to be on the safe side, especially if you're changing the weight of the vehicle like I am right now. So now, this thing is relatively loose. Now, and matter of fact, you can see how that's broken. That's broken in two right there. See that? So I'm going to need two hands to get this thing out of here because I got to manipulate it out. But I should be able to do that no issues. So as you can see so far, really not too bad. This is pretty simple. So let me get that out of the way and get the new mount. All right, so the old one's out. I'm going to get the new one in. You're supposed to put this heat shield in with it. You're supposed to transfer it over. See, it's got the tabs that you bend over. So let me get that transferred over to the new mount because it doesn't come with it. So let's do that, and then we'll get this in place. So there, the shield is switched over. One thing I did do is that centering stud, I actually trimmed off about 1/4 of an inch of it, because that will actually help you in maneuvering this thing in and out. That thing will still fit down into the hole where it has to go and still center. It's just it's a bit long, and then it just aggravates. It adds to the aggravation of getting these things in and out. So you just trim it off a little bit. Like I said, I took a cut-off wheel. You can take a Sawzall, whatever. Just cut off the very end of it, and it'll help you get this thing in place. All right, so now let's get this up in place. I wish I could film this at the same time, but I kind of can't. I don't have 4 hands. So let's get this in place. All right, so now the mount is in place. One thing is I took 2 bolts. I left the bolts underneath the hood, so I just grabbed 2 spare bolts. And what I did was I caught them through the mount here, because when I lay the motor down, I'll then pull these out once the weight is on there, once I catch the upper bolts that go through here. But at least this way I know when I go from underneath the hood to catch these bolts, I know everything's lined up. Now yes, there's that centering stud that I was telling you about right there. And you see it's going through fine. That's the reason for that, so everything lines up. But I do this too, just to be on the safe side. I like for everything to be lined up. And one thing I forgot to mention is the knock sensor. The knock sensor bolts up over here. You can see on the side of the motor right there. That's where it goes. I unbolted it. I took it out of the way because I didn't want to take a chance of breaking it. So, I mean, it's just simple. It's a 10mm headed bolt, and it just locks in place and in the wiring harness. So I just took that out of the way just to make my life a little bit easier, and like I said, just so I don't break it. So let's get this bolted up. Let's let this down. Let the jacks down in this. I can align those bolt holes up to the block and catch those 4 bolts. And there you go. I got the 4 bolts caught. One thing I neglected to mention, see, this is still loose. I don't have all the weight off of this yet. So I let it down until I can maneuver this enough to catch the bolts. Now that I got the bolts caught, I can go ahead and snug them down a little bit. Then I'm going to let all the weight down, you know, take the screw jack out, and I'll let all the weight down. Then I'll tighten everything. Because otherwise, if you let that thing down and try to catch those bolts, you're going to be fighting yourself. So let me do that, and I'll get the knock sensor in, and then let's get this down and get this out of here. And there you go. I just wanted to show you everything's in place. The knock sensor's in place. It's tightened up. It's connected. And I took those 2 guide bolts out that I put in. Like I said, it's really not necessary. I just do it as peace of mind to myself. So now we can let it down. If you really want to have a bad day, make sure you forget to take the screw jack out that you had underneath the back of the vehicle. I've seen people do it. And trust me, that's a bad day. They forget about it, they let the vehicle down, and then you can just imagine what happens. So that's out of the way. Let me let it down. Let me catch those 3 bolts, and we're done. There we go. Everything's held together. You can see the paper that I left on there from... I stuck paper in the bolt. This way it holds it in place. Let me just get that out of there. If I can get it out of there. Yeah, there we go. All right, so everything's good there. I'm going to take it for a quick road test and send it back to the customer. All right, guys, so I just took this thing around the block just to make sure everything's okay. I've had people ask me in the past, why do I road test everything? Well, I do. I road test everything for a reason. I don't want a customer coming back and saying, oh, I have this problem or that problem, and it wasn't there before you did the job. Meanwhile, it might have been. You know what I mean? And usually I'll road test a vehicle beforehand also. I didn't road test this vehicle beforehand because the driver's door was missing. I actually had to put a driver's door on this. The hinges broke and and the door fell off. But yeah, so that's the reason I road test everything before and after, because I want to see exactly what's going on with the vehicle. And this way, because I've had people in the past say, oh, I had this problem or whatever problem, and I never had it before, or I have this problem, I never had it before. And it's like, no, you did have that problem before. It has nothing to do with what I did. And and this way too, I can also, like when I call a customer and say, okay, this is what I need to do to fix your car. Oh, hey, do you also know you have a wheel bearing going bad, something, anything. But that's the reason for me always road testing every single car that I have. I don't road test oil changes usually, but anytime I take a wheel off for like a tire rotation, yeah, I'll whip it down the street real quick, because I want to feel it. Because God forbid I missed something, it can happen. So anyway, that's it. Enough of the rambling. All right, guys. Hopefully you got something out of that video. If you did, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. All right, guys. Have a great day. Keep wrenching.